The first meeting in the sky. The night sky stretched infinitely, a canvas of deep navy blue speckled with tiny twinkling stars. A massive Boeing 787 Dreamliner soared through the atmosphere at 35,000 feet, its engines humming a rhythmic lullaby to the passengers on board. Inside the aircraft, the soft ambient lighting created a calm, luxurious atmosphere. Some passengers slept, wrapped in cozy blankets, while others scrolled through their phones or whispered softly to their travel companions. But for Captain Olivia Carter, sleep was a foreign concept at this altitude. Her fingers moved effortlessly over the controls inside the cockpit, her sharp blue eyes scanning the instruments with the precision of someone who had spent years mastering the art of flight. Olivia wasn't just any pilot. She was one of the youngest female captains in the industry, a woman who had worked tirelessly to prove herself in a field dominated by men. Born into one of the wealthiest families in New York, Olivia had never needed to work a day in her life if she didn't want to. But she was never the kind of woman to sit back and enjoy the privileges of wealth. She had fought tooth and nail to earn her place in the skies, and now, thousands of feet above the earth, she felt at home. Her voice came through the aircraft's intercom, smooth and composed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain, Olivia Carter, speaking. We are currently cruising at an altitude of 35,000 feet. Our estimated arrival time is 3 hours from now. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight. Thank you for choosing Skywings Airlines." With that, she switched off the microphone and leaned back in her seat, allowing herself a moment of stillness. But tonight's flight was going to be anything but ordinary. A passenger who would change everything. In seat 21A, a man stared absent-mindedly out of the window, his fingers wrapped around a paper coffee cup. His name was Nathan Parker, and unlike most of the passengers on this flight, he wasn't heading home from a vacation or a business trip. Nathan had just walked out of an interview for a position he had desperately wanted, an opportunity that could change his life. But things hadn't gone as planned. The interviewers had seemed unimpressed, and he could already hear the rejection email landing in his inbox before he even touched the ground. Life had never been kind to him. Born into a working-class family in Chicago, Nathan had learned from a young age that nothing came easy. His father had worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table, and his mother had spent endless nights worrying about unpaid bills. Nathan had sworn to build a better future for himself, but no matter how hard he tried, the world always seemed to pull him back down. He let out a tired sigh and took a sip of his now cold coffee. That's when the turbulence hit. Chaos in the skies, a sudden jolt shook the plane. Passengers gasped as their drinks spilled, overhead compartments rattled, and the seatbelt sign flashed aggressively. Some people clutched their armrests, their faces turning pale with fear. Flight attendants hurried to reassure them, but the uneasy whispers spread like wildfire. Inside the cockpit, Olivia's eyes narrowed. "Autopilot off," she commanded, her hands gripping the controls. Beside her, her co-pilot, Ethan Williams, glanced at her for direction. "Looks like an unexpected air pocket," Ethan muttered. Olivia wasn't convinced. Something about this turbulence felt off. "Keep an eye on the readings," she instructed, her voice steady. The plane lurched again, and this time, a muffled cry came from the cabin. Olivia's instincts kicked in. She knew she had to stabilize the aircraft before the passengers panicked. Back in the cabin, Nathan noticed a flight attendant struggling to assist an elderly woman who had nearly fallen. Without thinking, he unbuckled his seatbelt and moved toward them, steadying the woman with a firm grip. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked gently. The woman nodded shakily, gripping his arm. The flight attendant, a young woman named Sophia Reed, looked up at him, her brown eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she breathed. "That was..." Before she could finish her sentence, another jolt rocked the plane. Nathan instinctively held onto the woman, steadying both of them. Around him, nervous murmurs rippled through the cabin. But in the cockpit, Olivia had already taken control. She pressed a button, addressing the passengers once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, We are experiencing some unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We appreciate your patience." Her voice was calm, reassuring, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. An unseen connection. Once the turbulence had passed and the plane had stabilized, Olivia allowed herself to breathe. She took a moment to glance at the cabin monitor, scanning the faces of the passengers. Her eyes landed on Nathan. She had seen many passengers over the years, but something about him stood out. The way he had immediately helped someone without hesitation, the quiet strength in his presence. It intrigued her. Ethan caught her staring and smirked. "See something interesting?" he teased. Olivia shook her head. "Just observing." But deep down, she had a strange feeling. Something told her that this man, this stranger in 21A, was going to change her life in ways she never expected. And she wasn't wrong. Because fate was already working its magic, a chance encounter beyond the clouds. The turbulence had subsided, but the lingering tension in the cabin remained. Some passengers still clutched their armrests, their eyes darting around nervously. The flight attendants moved through the aisles, offering reassuring smiles and checking on anyone who seemed particularly shaken. Nathan Parker, still standing near the elderly woman he had helped, slowly exhaled. "Thank you, young man," the woman said, patting his hand gently. Her name tag, attached to a lanyard around her neck, read Margaret Henderson. She looked to be in her 70s, her silver hair pinned neatly back. Nathan smiled. "Just glad you're okay, ma'am." Sophia Reed, the flight attendant who had struggled to assist Margaret, touched his arm lightly. "You really handled that well. Not everyone keeps a cool head during turbulence like that." Nathan chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, I guess growing up in Chicago teaches you a thing or two about staying calm in stressful situations." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Chicago, huh? That explains the confidence." Margaret smiled between them before waving a dismissive hand. "Well, dear, when a handsome young man helps a lady in distress, he deserves a drink, don't you think?" Nathan laughed. "I won't say no to that." Sophia grinned. "I'll see what I can do." With that, she returned to the galley to get him a complimentary drink. Nathan helped Margaret back into her seat before returning to his own, but as he sat down, something in the cockpit caught Olivia Carter's attention. A pilot's intrigue. Inside the cockpit, Olivia's gaze was still fixed on the monitor. The small screen displayed a live feed of the cabin, and her eyes once again landed on Nathan Parker. She had no reason to be so intrigued. After all, she had flown thousands of flights, seen millions of faces, and yet, something about this man pulled her attention. "Earth to Olivia," Ethan Williams, her co-pilot, teased. "You're staring." Olivia cleared her throat and looked away. "I was just making sure everything is under control." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, sure, if you say so." She rolled her eyes but said nothing. Her mind was still caught on the strange pull she felt toward the man in 21A, an unlikely conversation. An hour later, with the turbulence a distant memory, Nathan sat comfortably in his seat, sipping on a glass of whiskey that Sophia had quietly delivered to him. He was finally starting to relax when he noticed movement near the cockpit. To his surprise, the pilot herself stepped out. Captain Olivia Carter, with her neatly tied blonde hair and striking blue eyes, moved down the aisle with the authority of someone who commanded respect. Dressed in her crisp white uniform, she radiated confidence. Nathan wasn't the only one who noticed. Several passengers turned their heads, whispering in admiration at seeing such a young and powerful female captain. But what surprised him even more was that Olivia stopped, right next to his seat. "Enjoying the flight?" she asked, her voice smooth and professional. Nathan looked up at her, momentarily stunned. Yeah. It's been a memorable one, to say the least." She folded her arms, tilting her head slightly. I saw you helping Ms. Henderson during the turbulence. That was impressive. Nathan chuckled. I just did what anyone would do. Not everyone would have reacted so quickly, Olivia countered. Most people panic. You didn't. There was something sharp in her gaze, something that told Nathan she was genuinely curious about him. He smirked. Well, let's just say life's thrown a lot of turbulence at me before. I guess I'm used to it. Olivia raised an eyebrow. That so? Nathan nodded but didn't elaborate. He wasn't one to spill his life story to strangers, especially not to a woman like Olivia Carter, who, judging by her expensive wristwatch and diamond stud earrings, came from a world far different from his. Anyway, she continued, I just wanted to personally thank you. Not every day we see passengers taking charge in a situation like that. Nathan shrugged. No need to thank me, Captain. Just part of being human. Olivia gave a small, approving nod. Well, Mr. Parker, I hope you enjoy the rest of your flight. As she turned to leave, Nathan called out, Wait, how do you know my name? She glanced over her shoulder with a knowing smirk. I'm the captain, Mr. Parker. I know everything. And just like that, she disappeared back into the cockpit, leaving Nathan staring after her, completely bewildered. Something told him that wouldn't be their last conversation. A landing that changes everything. The remainder of the flight went smoothly. By the time the plane began its descent into Los Angeles International Airport, most of the passengers were eager to disembark. Nathan, however, found himself replaying his brief conversation with Olivia over and over in his head. Why had she taken an interest in him? And more importantly, why did he care? As the plane touched down and passengers began collecting their belongings, Nathan felt a strange sense of anticipation. He knew it was ridiculous. He was never going to see Captain Olivia Carter again. She was a woman from an entirely different world, someone with money, power, and a life so far removed from his own that even thinking about her was a waste of time. And yet, as he walked through the airport terminal, a voice behind him made him freeze. Nathan Parker. He turned around, and there she was, Olivia Carter, standing just a few feet away, her pilot's jacket draped over her arm. What are the chances? She said, a playful glint in her eyes. Nathan smirked. Well, Captain, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you're following me. She let out a small laugh. Let's just say I was curious. About what? She hesitated for a brief second before replying. About you. Nathan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Well, now I'm curious too. Olivia smiled. Good. Then let's grab a coffee and see where this curiosity takes us. And just like that, fate pulled them together once more. But neither of them had any idea just how much their lives were about to change. A coffee that changed everything. Los Angeles International Airport buzzed with its usual energy, passengers rushing to their gates, flight announcements echoing through the massive terminal, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee mixing with the crisp airport air. Amidst the organised chaos, Nathan Parker found himself seated at a small cafe table across from Captain Olivia Carter, the woman he never expected to see again. Yet here they were. A steaming cup of coffee sat in front of him, untouched, as he tried to process what was happening. Olivia Carter, the young, confident, and undeniably attractive pilot who had just flown him across the country, had asked him for coffee. If he wasn't sitting here himself, he would have thought it was a dream. So, Olivia said, stirring her cappuccino with a silver spoon, you've got me curious, Nathan. What brings you to Los Angeles? Nathan leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. A job interview. Good or bad? She asked, watching him closely. He let out a short, dry chuckle. Let's just say, I'm not expecting a call back. Olivia tilted her head slightly. That bad? It wasn't terrible, Nathan admitted. But it wasn't great either. They took one look at my resume and saw a guy who didn't come from an Ivy League school, didn't have corporate connections, and basically had to claw his way through life. He shrugged. They want polished. I'm not that. Olivia studied him for a moment, her blue eyes unreadable. You don't strike me as the type to give up easily. Nathan smirked. I don't. But even the toughest fighters get tired sometimes. A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but weighty. Olivia took a sip of her coffee before placing the cup down carefully. So what now? She asked. Nathan exhaled. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I'll try again. Maybe I'll head back to Chicago, regroup, and figure out my next move. Olivia tapped her fingers on the table thoughtfully. Or maybe this was a sign. Nathan raised an eyebrow. A sign? She nodded. You didn't get the job, but maybe that's because something better is waiting for you. Nathan scoffed. You believe in fate, Captain? A small smirk played on her lips. Maybe I just believe that sometimes life surprises us in ways we never see coming. Nathan leaned forward slightly, intrigued. And what about you? Do you always invite passengers for coffee after a flight, or am I just that lucky? Olivia let out a soft laugh. I don't usually do this, no. So, why me? Her smirk faded slightly, replaced by something more contemplative. Because I saw something in you back on that flight. The way you handled that turbulence, the way you helped Margaret. It wasn't just about instinct, it was about character. And character is something I respect. Nathan held her gaze, feeling something shift between them. This wasn't just a random encounter. Something was happening here, something neither of them had expected, an offer he couldn't refuse. Their conversation stretched long past the first cup of coffee. They talked about everything: Olivia's love for flying, Nathan's struggles to find his place in the world, their shared desire for something more than the ordinary. By the time they left the cafe, the sun had started to dip below the horizon, casting golden hues across the airport tarmac. As they walked toward the exit, Olivia suddenly turned to Nathan. I have an idea, she said. Nathan smirked. That sounds dangerous. She rolled her eyes. I'm serious. What if, instead of going back to Chicago, you stay here in LA for a while? Nathan raised an eyebrow. And do what exactly? She shrugged. Figure things out. Try something new. Who knows, maybe this city has something waiting for you. Nathan let out a short laugh. You make it sound so easy. Olivia's expression softened. I know it's not, but sometimes the best things happen when we take a chance. Nathan studied her for a long moment. He had never been the kind of guy to believe in fate, but something about this, about her, made him wonder if, maybe, just maybe, she was right. And so, against all logic, against all his carefully laid out plans, Nathan Parker made a decision. He was going to stay. And he had a feeling that decision was about to change everything. A love that defied gravity. Los Angeles International Airport was alive with the usual hustle and bustle, families embracing, hurried footsteps echoing across the polished floors, and flight announcements ringing through the speakers. But for Nathan Parker, time had frozen. Standing in front of Olivia Carter, his breath still heavy from running across the terminal, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was the most important moment of his life. She was leaving. And if she walked through that gate, he might never see her again. Nathan, Olivia repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. His heart pounded. I don't have a plan. I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I can't let you walk away without telling you. She placed a hand on his chest, stopping him mid-sentence. Don't say it, she murmured, her blue eyes flickering with something unreadable. Nathan swallowed hard. Why not? Because if you say it, it becomes real, she whispered. A long silence stretched between them. Behind her, the final boarding call for her flight to London echoed over the speakers. "Then let it be real," Nathan finally said. "Because whatever this is, Olivia, it already is." Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to respond. But then, the gate attendant called her name. "Captain Carter, we need you on board." Olivia turned her head slightly, hesitation flashing across her face. This was her world. This was where she belonged. And Nathan, he was a man without a destination. A man who had crashed into her life like unexpected turbulence, shaking everything she thought she knew. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Tell me not to fight for this, and I'll walk away," he said, searching her eyes. "Tell me this was just a coincidence, and I'll let you go." Olivia sucked in a sharp breath, her fingers curling at her sides. But she didn't say it. She couldn't. Because no matter how much she tried to convince herself otherwise, she knew this wasn't just chance. This was something deeper, something terrifying, something she wasn't ready for. The final boarding call rang out again, and Olivia Carter did the one thing she had never done in her life. She ran, not toward the gate, but away from it, straight into Nathan's arms, a reckless choice, a perfect moment. Nathan held her tight as the entire airport faded away. "You're insane," he muttered against her hair. "Yeah, well," she breathed. "So are you." He pulled back just enough to see her face, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You just gave up an international flight for me." She smirked. "Correction. I gave up one flight for something that might just be worth more than 1,000 flights." Nathan exhaled shakily. "And what exactly is that?" Her expression softened. "You." His entire chest ached at her words. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to fall for a woman who had the entire sky at her feet. But here she was, choosing him. Choosing this, choosing them. And for the first time in his life, Nathan Parker finally understood what it meant to take a leap of faith. As he leaned in, brushing his lips against hers in a soft, lingering kiss, he knew. This wasn't the end of their journey. It was just the beginning. The hum of the airport had faded, drowned out by the pounding of Olivia Carter's heart. She had spent years learning how to navigate the most unpredictable skies, mastering every turbulence, controlling every descent. But nothing in her training had prepared her for this. For the first time in her life, she had abandoned a flight, not because of an emergency, but because of a choice named Nathan Parker. The weight of her decision settled in as she pulled away from him, her fingers still gripping the fabric of his jacket like she was afraid he'd vanish. Nathan stared at her, his dark brown eyes flickering with a mixture of disbelief and something deeper, something neither of them were ready to name. "You actually stayed," he murmured. She exhaled shakily. "I actually stayed." Nathan let out a breathless laugh, running a hand through his hair. "Jesus, Olivia. Do you have any idea what you just did?" She swallowed, her throat dry. "Yeah, I just threw away a perfectly good flight to London, probably my reputation, and maybe even my career." Nathan's smile faltered. "So why did you do it?" She sucked in a deep breath, searching for the words. "Because flying means nothing if I don't have a reason to land." His jaw tightened, and before she could say anything else, he kissed her. Not the hesitant, uncertain kind of kiss they had shared before, but the kind that was filled with fire, with certainty, with every unspoken feeling they had been dancing around since the moment they met. For the first time in forever, Olivia felt like she wasn't floating through life alone. But the world had other plans. Reality always catches up. The magic of the moment was shattered by the sharp ringing of Olivia's phone. She pulled away, her breath still uneven as she reached into her pocket. Captain Williams. Nathan watched her carefully. "You should answer that." She hesitated, then picked up. "Olivia Carter," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Jesus, Olivia, what the hell is going on? Ethan Williams, her co-pilot, sounded frantic. They just delayed the flight waiting for you, and now the company's asking questions. Did you just walk away? She swallowed. You what? Ethan demanded. Do you have any idea what this could do to your career? She did. She knew exactly what it meant. Being a pilot wasn't just a job. It was her identity, the thing that had given her purpose when nothing else had. And yet, here she was, standing in an airport terminal, contemplating throwing it all away for a man she had known for barely 24 hours. Her silence stretched. Olivia, Ethan's voice softened. Are you okay? She looked at Nathan, who was watching her like she was the most important thing in the world, and she knew she wasn't okay. Because love wasn't supposed to happen this fast. Because love wasn't supposed to make her question everything she had worked for. Because love wasn't supposed to be this terrifying. But it was, and she didn't know how to handle it. Finally, she spoke. Tell them I'm not coming, she whispered. And before Ethan could respond, she hung up. Nathan's breath hitched. Olivia? She grabbed his hands, gripping them tightly, like she was anchoring herself to him. I don't know how this ends, Nathan, she admitted, her voice raw. I don't know if this is crazy or reckless or the worst mistake of my life, but I do know that when I walk away from you, I feel like I'm leaving behind something I don't want to lose. Nathan exhaled, tightening his hold on her. Then don't. She wanted to believe it could be that simple, but deep down, she knew nothing about them was simple. Falling in love is easy, staying is the hard part. The next few weeks were a blur. Olivia didn't return to London. Instead, she stayed in Los Angeles, getting to know Nathan Parker, not as the stranger in seat 21A, but as the man who made her question everything. She learned that he laughed with his whole body when he was comfortable, that he hated black coffee but drank it anyway because it made him feel like he had his life together, that he had spent his entire life trying to be someone people wouldn't overlook, only to realize that the right person had seen him from the start. And Nathan. He learned that Olivia Carter, the fearless pilot, was afraid of something after all, losing him. But love was never just about choosing someone. It was about choosing them every day, even when things got messy, even when fear crept in. And for Olivia, fear did creep in. Because one night, as she lay next to Nathan, tracing the scars on his knuckles, a terrifying thought hit her. What if this doesn't last? What if they were just a beautiful moment, a love story written in turbulence, doomed to crash the second real life caught up? She couldn't lose him, but she also couldn't lose herself. The goodbye. That wasn't the end. One morning, Olivia woke up and made a decision. She found Nathan in the kitchen, making pancakes that looked more like burnt bricks than actual food. He turned, grinning. I know what you're thinking, and yes, they taste as bad as they look. She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. Nathan, she whispered. Something in her voice made him freeze. Don't do that, he said, his expression darkening. Don't talk like you're about to walk away. She stepped closer, her chest aching. I'm not walking away, but I do need to figure out who I am outside of us. Nathan's jaw clenched. So, you're leaving. I'm not leaving you, she insisted. I need to fly again. I need to prove to myself that I can be both, a pilot and a woman who loves you. Nathan stared at her for a long time before exhaling. You really are the most stubborn woman I've ever met. She smiled softly. I know. He reached out, pulling her close. And what if you go up there and realize you don't need me? He murmured against her hair. She pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. Then I guess I'll just have to fly back to you. Nathan let out a short laugh, shaking his head. Damn you, Carter. She grinned. I know. And just like that, Olivia Carter took off. This time, knowing exactly where she would land. An ending that was never really an end. 2 months later, Nathan stood in an airport terminal, his heart racing. The arrival board flickered. Flight 304, London to Los Angeles, landed. He exhaled, shoving his hands into his pockets. And then, there she was, dressed in her pilot's uniform, looking every bit the woman he had fallen for. Their eyes met, and in that single second, he knew. She had come home. She smiled. Told you I'd fly back. Nathan grinned. Took you long enough. And as he pulled her into his arms, the entire airport faded away. Because love wasn't about holding someone down, it was about letting them fly and knowing they'd always come back. The end? Or maybe just the beginning? Thank you for reading. Let me know if you want another story.